escucha. Hola, bienvenidos. Qué bueno que están todos aquí esta mañana, mediodía. Y estamos súper contentos de presentar a LAINI Taylor. Gracias, LAINI, por venir desde Portland. Y gracias a Raquel Castro. Es una autora súper reconocida de literatura juvenil, que además colaboró en la edición de Noche de Pastel y Marionetas. Y pues nada, se han encontrado en esta ocasión. Son las dos muy fans de literatura fantástica, por ejemplo, de terror y cosas creepy. Entonces, pues bienvenidas, chicas, y pues bienvenidos a todos en nombre de Alfaguara y de Penguin Random House. De repente me saqué un poco de onda, perdón, estoy trastabillando, pero estamos aquí todos y los dejo a todos, perdón, con nuestras chicas. Chao.
Pues muchas gracias por estar aquí, muchas gracias Alfaguara por invitarme a presentar a LAINI. Estoy muy emocionada, me imagino que ustedes lo están también. Imagínense yo, aquí sentada, ya pregunté si teníamos 50 minutos o 2 horas o 4, ¿no? Pero nada, son 50 minutos, entonces yo voy a hacer una pequeña introducción para dejar que LAINI hable y sobre todo para que ustedes, si tienen preguntas o comentarios que le quieran hacer, aprovechen, porque de verdad es una gran oportunidad, ¿no? Tener con a uno de sus autores favoritos y poder reclamarle. Sí les pasa, ¿no? Que están leyendo y dicen, oh my God, ¿por qué hiciste esto? ¿No? Entonces, para comenzar, yo quisiera una pequeña encuesta. Bueno, antes de hacer mi pequeña encuesta, voy a dejar que LAINI lo salude, porque normalmente uno cuando modera habla, echa un choro largotote, y cuando por fin toma la palabra el autor, tiene que empezar saludando otra vez. Entonces, si gustas saludar a tu público primero.
Hi, everybody. So thank you so much for coming. It's wonderful to be here and to be back here. Did any of you guys come 4 years ago when I was here? Did I see any? Yeah, well, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much. I love coming to Mexico. You guys are the best readers and the most passionate fans. So it's really such a pleasure to be here. And excited to answer your questions.
Bueno, pues primera pregunta para ustedes. ¿Quiénes ya leyeron El soñador desconocido? Ok, pregunto esto porque luego uno se arranca hablando de un libro como dando por hecho que todo el mundo ya lo leyó y empiezan los spoilers, ¿no? Y cuando llega la parte, se hunde el barco y se muere el príncipe y todo eso, y la gente se va viendo la carita como de, voy en el capítulo 3, ¿no? Entonces, procuraremos no hacer spoilers. ¿Quiénes leyeron ya la trilogía anterior de LAINI? ¿Tienes fans? Muy bien. Yo soy pésima para contar los libros, soy de las que spoilean y que empiezan contando al final, entonces solo les voy a decir que El soñador desconocido tiene mucho que ver con los sueños, pero de un modo muy particular, porque nuestro personaje principal, que es un bibliotecario, tiene sueños que no necesariamente le ocurren a él, y ya eso es algo curioso. Yo empecé a leerlo y me quedé pensando en eso. ¿Qué pasaría si mis sueños se hicieran realidad, pero a otra persona, en otro lado del mundo, y que yo nunca me enterara, y que uno cree que son puros sueños y que en realidad están pasando? Es una premisa muy interesante, ¿no? Que uno puede pensar, ay, a mí nunca se me cumplen mis sueños, y descubrir que se le están cumpliendo a alguien más o que están pasando en otro lado. Y bueno, que sea un bibliotecario a mí me parece fantástico y maravilloso, porque los nerds al poder, ¿no? Ya es tiempo. Y bueno, este personaje sueña con Whip, una ciudad perdida, donde pasan cosas, y él quiere ir a esa ciudad porque ya la siente como propia, ¿Y les gustan las historias de amor? Tenemos una historia de amor también que llega muy pausadamente, que nos va agarrando un poco por sorpresa y qué difícil es contar un libro sin hacer spoilers. Pero lo que les puedo decir es que desde el momento en que lo abren se dan cuenta que están entrando a un mundo mítico y que está tan bien narrado que nos cuesta trabajo diferenciarlo del mundo real. O sea, que pensamos, no, a mí se me hace que LAINI se puso a leer de antropología y de arqueología y esto que nos está contando sí pasó en otro rincón del mundo. O es de la Atlántida, ¿no? O una cosa así. Nos volvemos parte de ese mundo y llega el momento en que ya no sabemos si vivimos en este o en este. Digo, quienes ya lo leyeron podrán decir si estoy diciendo verdad o estoy diciendo mentira, ¿no? Entonces, a mí me gustaría, LAINI, que nos contaras un poquito de este universo que creaste y de dónde salió la idea, o sea, cuál fue el primer chispazo de inspiración que te llevó a escribir 500 y tantas páginas sobre este mundo.
Thank you for that amazing introduction, Raquel. So, I mean, where to start? I guess the first seed of the idea of the book was a character who's been in my mind for 20, 25 years, something like that. I think maybe she came from a dream a long, long time ago. I'm not sure because she's been in my mind for so long, and she was called the Muse of Nightmares. And all I knew about her was that she sent nightmares to the people who lived in this city. And I didn't know why. And I think when I was younger, I mean, I tried to write a story about it, but I didn't succeed because when I was younger, usually when I tried to write something, I didn't succeed because I had a lot of creative issues with not being able to finish things, with perfectionism, with, like many young writers start a story and then never finish it or lose their passion partway through or get afraid. And so that was the case for me. But she always stayed in my mind. And so after I finished writing The Daughter of Smoke and Bone Saga, I was trying to figure out what book I wanted to write next. I have so many ideas in my mind because I'm a fairly slow writer, and it took me so long to learn how to finish a book that all these ideas stack up, because ideas are the easy part. It's actually writing them down on paper that's the hard part. And so I actually imagine these ideas as people waiting in line in my mind. To varying degrees of patience because they've been there a long time. And sometimes an idea will show up and cut to the front of the line, like that's what happened with Carew and Brimstone. They just went straight to the front of the line. I think the other ideas must have grumbled and been very nonplussed about that. But in the case of Sarai, I thought, why is this character still so appealing to me after all this time? And started thinking about, what would her story be? And all I knew was a little bit about this character, not enough to write a book. So I started thinking, and I was actually on a writer's retreat in Mexico with a bunch of other writers when this happened. I was in San Miguel de Allende with Cassandra Clare and Holly Black and Sarah Reese Brennan and Kelly Link, all these amazing writers. And they were working really hard, but I had just finished writing the third book in the trilogy, so my brain was broken and I wasn't working very hard. I was recovering, but then I was thinking about what I want to write next. So that was where the first ideas started to come together. And the idea of Sarai, the Muse of Nightmares joined together with the idea of these half-human left-behind children of gods after a war. In my first concept, there had been a war between gods and men, and the gods had lost and they had left, and they didn't take their half-human children with them. They left them behind. When I actually wrote the book, it had become more violent than that. The gods were actually killed, justifiably so. And so that began to give it a story shape. And I don't know where the idea of Weep came from or this lost city, but at some point I had the idea that there was this great lost city that this had all happened in. And I knew that I wanted to lead into the story through the eyes of an outsider who had been dreaming about this city. And so that character was Laszlo, this young librarian. And the more I tried to imagine who he was so I could get into the story, something started to happen, and that gradually he became the main character instead of Sarai. And the moment that happened was I was describing young librarian character who's a reader and who's made fun of by the other librarians because he reads fairy tales and he's obsessed with myths and legends, and he's not serious like the other scholars and the other librarians. And at the moment that I wrote that his nose had been broken by a falling book of fairy tales when he was a boy, I immediately fell in love with him, and he became the main character of the book. Because here was a young man who was literally shaped by stories. And I thought that's the perfect character for me. And I think that this book really ended up becoming a love letter to readers. And Laszlo Strange is a love letter to fiction readers, but also especially to fantasy readers. And it's this sort of unlikely hero. He doesn't think of himself as a hero. He can't fight. He's a reader. He reads fairy tales, and yet he discovers his own heroism through the course of the story.
Como paréntesis, a mí me gusta mucho hacer paréntesis, debo decirles que hace unos años estaba en San Miguel Allende y me encontré a un amigo que se llama Gavin y me dijo, estoy aquí paseando porque mi esposa está en un taller literario con sus amigas y su esposa es Kelly Link. Entonces estoy pensando que mientras yo estaba paseando en San Miguel Allende, tú estabas tallereando y me da mucha emoción porque las coincidencias no existen y tenía que compartirlo con ustedes. Ustedes han de decir, bueno, y a mí que me importa, yo quiero que LAINI me diga más cosas. Entonces cierro mi paréntesis y me gustaría que nos platicaras más de la ciudad, porque nos decías que primero te imaginaste la ciudad y luego al protagonista. Y pienso también en tus otros libros que todos los lugares son muy vívidos, que uno siente que podría tomar un avión y pasear por esas ciudades que tú nos describes. ¿Cómo vas perfilando estas ciudades? En este caso, ¿en qué momento te das cuenta que ya cobró vida o qué elementos son los que necesitas indispensablemente en una ciudad que estás imaginando?
Well, first thing is that I think that for years, Cassie and Holly and Kelly came every year to Mexico, so maybe it was a different year. I don't know.
But I like magic and coincidences.
Well, it was wonderful, and what a beautiful town, so incredible. But as far as Weep and inventing the city of Weep and world building in general, I think I had the idea of, I love the idea of being the first person to discover something that your own people have never seen before, and like the idea of being an explorer, like I think of Marco Polo, who was the first Westerner to see many of these Eastern Silk Road cities, and what that must have been like to see something that was so completely different from your own culture, and that no one from your part of the world had ever been there before, or ever even been able to describe it. And like I just think that's so amazing. So I wanted to create that experience. But when I'm doing world building, I think that what I try to do is I try to give the reader just enough information that their mind will do a lot of the work. Because I think, I think big blocks of explanation or description really make the reader's mind just skip over it. So I try to never have too much description, but just to use evocative words and just the right small combination of words that will make your mind then build the city itself. So if I used to say golden domes, then your mind builds a city with golden domes. That's way cooler than anything I could describe, even if I took 2 pages to do it, which you wouldn't even want to read anyway because it would be boring. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I think when I was a younger writer, I used to be more indulgent to myself about writing description because I enjoyed that. But now I'm very afraid of writing too much description because I don't want to lose the reader's attention. So I look for ways to just kind of tap into the ideas that we all already have in our minds and then kind of activate them. So as a reader, even if I say just a little bit, that you will take it to the next level and create something much bigger. So I think that if, I keep saying that this is true, but I'm not sure that it is, that if I were to go to my book and highlight the actual description, what I'm hoping is that there would be less than you think, because I hope that I'm just making you do the work for me. But I'm not sure if that's true, but I think that's true. And one of the things that I like to do in creating another world is just give a few clues to you that will let you know that you're in a different world. So right from the beginning of this book, we find out that people in this world have 2 hearts, and that the second heart pumps a mysterious clear fluid, and they don't really know what it does. So I think right away then you know you're not in Earth, you're not in our world. And there's a few other little clues like that. And I think that just those teeny details give you enough enough of a sense of being somewhere else, and that you don't really have to go. A little world building goes a long way. So I really am always trying to keep it minimal so that the reader doesn't get bored. Yeah.
Es que con la traducción vamos siempre un pasito atrás, ¿no? Pero agradecemos mucho a nuestra traductora por hacer un excelente trabajo y para que los que no hablan inglés puedan estar prácticamente simultáneamente en esto. Oye, nos decías primero que Sarai era el personaje en el que pensaste primero. Además es hermosa la idea de la musa de las pesadillas. Y de repente Laszlo empieza a ganar terreno y a convertirse en el protagonista. ¿No te costó trabajo irle cediendo ese lugar a él? ¿Cómo haces para que cuando un personaje se va volviendo importante, irle dando su espacio y no aferrarte a una idea preconcebida que traías de cómo iba a ser la historia?
Well, it does sound like he was pushy and he stole the book from her, but that's not really how it happened. In fact, I had a really hard time discovering the beginning of the book. I worked on it for maybe 8 months, writing a new beginning, and then it wouldn't be right, so I'd start over, write another beginning, start over. I did it like 20 times, and I couldn't really find the right form of the story. And I was getting a little bit desperate because time was going by, and I did need to finish the book at some point, whereas really I had barely begun it. Because for some reason I just couldn't get it the way, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted it to be, but nothing that I did felt right until I found that it was Laszlo's arc. And then it just fell into place. And so I didn't question it because immediately it became, I saw the way forward. And so I realized that that was the right form for this book. And I was so glad, I was so relieved. And the thing to know is that Sarai is very much in the book, but this first book is Laszlo's hero's journey. And then the second book, which will be coming out in Spanish in June, is more of Sarai's hero's journey. You know, they're both equal characters in both books, but it's more about his, his self-discovery, and the second book is more about her self-discovery. So it really is one big book split in two because I was trying to write one book. When I finished the saga, I was very tired, and I thought, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to write one book. And I tried, but then I realized it's getting kind of big. Maybe I'm going to have to split it in half. So that's in fact what happened. And I want to tell you guys who are readers of Daughter of Smoke and Bone that when you read this, you will recognize some things that seem familiar to you, and that you may not know that there is a connection between the books, but it becomes increasingly obvious in the second book, much more obvious. And so while you don't have to have read Daughter of Smoke and Bone to read these books, if you have, I think it's like wearing special glasses, that if you read these books having read Daughter of Smoke and Bone, you will see the secret things that other people won't see, and the ending will mean a lot more too. So I see.
Bueno, y con eso yo iba a preguntar precisamente si había alguna conexión, ya está dicho, y para cuándo salía el segundo, ya está dicho, porque además yo cuando lo leí no se me ocurrió preguntar si iba a haber segunda parte o no, o sea, lo leí pensando que era el todo, y cuando acabé sí me quedé así como de, eso sí les puedo contar y no es spoiler, y dije, espero que haya una segunda parte y que salga pronto. Leí por ahí en Goodreads, porque tienes muchos fans en Goodreads y se preguntan y contestan entre ellos, que pediste más tiempo a la editorial para terminar el libro porque te gusta darle el tiempo necesario para que queden bien las historias. Y eso me parece formidable porque en estos tiempos de prisa, donde hay autores que sacan 2 libros al año, pues agradece uno como lector cuando se nota el cuidadito, el amor del autor. ¿Cuánto tiempo en total te tardaste con este y cuánto pensabas al principio que te ibas a tardar?
Well, thank you for bringing up a very sore subject. No, oops, just kidding. It feels like it took 20 years, but in fact it was 2 years maybe. Usually it takes me about a year and a half to write a book. But in this case, a few things happened. When I finished the saga, I sold 2 ideas to my publisher for my next books. And I tried to write the other one first, and it was a science fiction, historical book. And I spent maybe 6 months working on it, and then I couldn't get it to come together, and I panicked, and I thought, I'm going to write the fantasy book because it's going to be easier. Ha ha ha. So at first it was easier, but then that thing happened where I kept not finding the right beginning, and so then another 8 months went by, and so it was really like a year had passed before I really got started on the book. And then when I did, I was already running behind, and it was a very tricky year. It was a hard book to write. And it's the first time, I'm usually always very late with my books, and we have an expression called crashing the schedule, which is what happens when the book is very late, and so you miss all of the deadlines that the publisher likes to build in. They like to have a book at least a year before it comes out finished. And when you don't have that, it becomes very uncomfortable for everybody. But I had done that multiple times, but in this case, it was the first time we actually had to change the publication schedule because I was too late. And it was a terrible feeling, and I know it was really hard for the publisher because for them to change a publication date is not easy. So, but I don't feel like I have a choice. Like there wasn't a time where the book was ready to be published. And I had gotten great advice one time from, do you guys know Patrick Rothfuss? When Daughter of Smoke and Bone had come out, and he blurbed it in England for the English publisher, and it was like the best blurb ever. He said, "I wish that I had written this book," and I was like, "Oh my God!" And he DM'd me and said, "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" And I was like, "Yes." And his advice was to take your time on the second book or on any book because, and I quote, "It will suck. It will be late once, but it will suck forever." Wow. So basically, you need to make the book what it needs to be, which is true, but it's also a business, so it's really hard on everyone to be late like that. So I was happy to finish Muse of Nightmares. I wouldn't say on time, but in time. In fact, I was on vacation in Mexico again, and I was supposed to be finished with the book, and I wasn't. And so I was on vacation down on the Riviera Maya, and I was supposed to be on vacation, but really I was finishing the book. So that was last spring, and I did it. So I'm very happy.
Esta es mi última pregunta para que empiecen ustedes. Películas. ¿Hay planes o te gustaría que hubiera películas sobre tus libros? ¿Verdad que es la pregunta que nos hacemos varios? Y hay quienes no quieren. Esto se va a poner interesante.
Daughter of Smoke and Bone came about as close to becoming a movie as you can get without actually becoming a movie. Universal Pictures, around the time that I was last at the FIL 4 years ago, was doing very active development. They spent a lot of money on screenplays and everything, and they spent several $1 million, and they had a director attached. And it got to that very final meeting where the president of Universal had to say yes or no, and they did not say yes. So that didn't happen, and the director at the time had not made a feature film yet, and now he has, and so his first movie would have been Daughter of Smoke and Bone, but instead his first movie was The Greatest Showman, so it was that guy. So I don't know if it'll ever get made. Fantasy books are very expensive to adapt as movies. It costs like $100 million or something like that. So I try not to think about it too much. There is somebody trying to do something now, but all I can really control is the book. And I would love for this to become a movie or a series as well, but it's completely out of my control. But yeah, it would be lovely. I think that in our culture now, so many people aren't readers. Or if they are readers, the only things that they are aware of to read are things that are made into movies or shows. One time I was in a bookstore in an airport in Texas, and I overheard a mother and daughter shopping for a book. She was a teenager, and they were very well-to-do, dressed nicely, obviously, wealthy people. You would think, maybe were aware of books. But in this case, the only books that they mentioned, the only ones they even saw, were ones that were familiar to them from movies or TV. It's the only things that even registered for them. So, you know, for an author, it's not, I mean, I think for me, the reason I would really love to have a movie is so that my books would become, be noticeable to a bigger reading audience. It would still be like an advertisement to read the book. But I don't know that it'll ever happen, but it would be really cool.
Bueno, muchachos, muchachas, levanten la mano, les van a pasar el micrófono y que empiece el tiroteo. Creo que la primera mano estuvo por acá, si nos hacen favor. Y ya después no vi porque no traigo los lentes, así que...
Hi. My name is Jackie. I didn't think I mentioned that yesterday that I met you. But I wanted to ask you, I am trying to write something fantasy, and I have a very hard time with names. And your names are always so beautiful and whimsical, and I just love them. How do you come out with them? Like, do you invent them? Do you search for them somewhere? Because they're amazing.
Thank you. I love coming up with names. I was recently looking for names for a project I'm working on now, and I got all my writing notebooks out. I have, if you go on Instagram, I always put pictures of my notebooks up because for every project I have a notebook, and I will collage the cover and really I love them. They're like my favorite things that I own are these writing notebooks. And one of the first things I do when I start a notebook for a new project is write pages of names that I might be able to use during the story. I need to get the main characters' names, of course, but then I make lists and lists of names so that when I'm writing, I can go and find names there. And I'll go to lots of places, like I look at maps a lot. So depending on the sort of feel of the place or the people that I'm writing about, I maybe will look at maps of like Morocco, the desert of North Africa, or Uzbekistan, or something like that. If I look at and find names of villages that they're really cool, and it's hard to invent fantasy names that don't sound like an invented fantasy name. Whereas, you know, real names, either of places or people or words in other languages, they have that authenticity because they are in fact authentic. And so I like to borrow from a lot of different places. Like in Daughter of Smoke and Bone, the name Ziri means moonlight in the Amazigh language, the Berber language from Morocco. So there was a lot of really cool words from that language that I used. So I have all these different lists of names in all my notebooks, and it just occurred to me that I should have one notebook just for names. And it seems like a very good use of my time to sit down instead of writing and just transfer all of my list of names carefully into one notebook. It sounds like a procrastination to me, but maybe I'll do it. We'll see. Yeah.
Oh, Dios mío, me va a dar algo. Primero que nada, te agradezco por tomarte el tiempo de venir. Pues me acuerdo hace 3 años o 2 años que viniste y había salido de repente, creo que de James Asher, y vi la fila de LAINI Taylor y dije, ¡ay, no manches, LAINI Taylor, traigo el libro! Y me los fui a comprar los demás. Entonces ahí que vi que no alcancé, pero seguía formada. Y entonces entraste y mi mamá estaba de, ándale, aviéntate a LAINI Taylor. Yo, no mamá, no. Y estaba entre si aventarme o no aventarme, pero traías guardaespaldas y era como, no mamá, me van a pegar, me van a detener. Pero lo que iba a preguntar es, de la trilogía de Hija de Humo y Hueso, si tuvieras que releer, reescribir y quemar uno de esos libros, ¿cuál sería?
Wow.
If I had to burn one of them, I'm scared of you now. I don't think I will ever change anything about those books, but interestingly, I am revising some things about my very first book right now, which is a book that has never been released in Spanish yet, at least, though it would be nice if it was. But I hope that, I mean, I haven't reread them in a while, and usually I've been happy afterwards with my books and not had things that I wanted to change. So But then when I had the experience now of revising my first book, I thought I only was going to change the beginning to make it more accessible for younger readers, because I think it started a little bit more slowly than I wanted. But once I started, then my mind wanted to rewrite everything, which I can't do, so I stopped myself. So I think I would be afraid to even consider anything like that. But I would like to certainly play in that world a little bit more. There's other novellas that I would love to write. And again, if you read Muse of Nightmares and Strange the Dream Mill, you will see you will see some things that hint at possible future stories that would be, you know, with characters that you know from Daughter of Smoke and Bone, maybe. Yeah. So, but please, I don't think I will be burning them anytime soon. But it was actually 4 years ago that I was here before, and I can't believe it was that long. But so thank you for coming back today. Yeah.
¿Dónde anda el micrófono? Si quieren, para agilizar un poquito mientras va contestando una, le vas pasando el micrófono a la que sigan, ¿no? Y para que nos dé tiempo de la mayor cantidad de ustedes que participen.
Hi, Laini. I'm nervous. I'm sorry. My question is, where your ideas come from, or your imagination, something like that? Mm-hmm. Your ideas.
Sure.
I don't know.
Where do my ideas come from?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't really know, because I think for me ideas are the easy part in a way, and then actually capturing them on paper is the hardest part. But I do also have the experience of, you know, maybe some ideas come easily and some others you have to work harder for. So, for example, you know, the day that I started writing what would become Daughter of Smoke and Bone, I'm not really sure where I felt like it came out of nowhere. I had been trying to write another book that I was really wasn't working out, and I had started to hate writing because this other book was so hard and so not fun that I gave myself one day to write anything else just for fun. And I sat down that day thinking I had no idea what I was going to write about, and immediately this blue-haired girl appeared, and she was arguing with her father, who was not human, and all these things, and it felt like it came out of nowhere. But then in reality, and that's almost the way I remember it, but in fact, if I look back at my blog of that time, I realized that I was involved in a writing, a writer's website that I had helped start, doing writing exercises from prompts. And for months, I had been doing these short writing exercises every week. And I realized, looking back, that all those things that seemed like they came out of nowhere on that day really came from all this writing exercises I was doing. And because I had been exercising my imagination just for fun, that a lot of these things, the wishbone, the teeth, all of that stuff was in there. And because I had been doing the work of just writing exercises, that I was ready. So it was like being prepared to have a day like that. And also in other experiences, you know, where I maybe get an idea, like with Sarai, but it's not a full idea yet, it's just a character, then I know what I have to do is sit down and get the rest of the idea. You know, it's not going to just happen. I have to sit down and work and work and work and, you know, ask myself a million questions. What's the story? You know, how do I create a story out of this character? What's the conflict? What are the other characters? Why does she give nightmares to people? You know, a million questions, and start answering them until they come together into something that feels like a story. So it's a lot of, I guess it's work, but it's fun work, the brainstorming part of the process, and always pushing past that first easy limit of your imagination. You know, you think of one thing, but what's the next thing? If you like make yourself keep thinking. So one thing I'll do is if I don't know what's going to happen next in a scene, I will make myself write down 20 things that could happen next. And maybe the second or third thing would be pretty good, but I won't let myself stop there, because if I make myself keep thinking of things, I'll get some crazy ideas, but then maybe I'll get ideas that I would never have gotten if I had stopped at the second or third thing, and maybe I'll get really excited, and it's making my subconscious work more, and it'll start uncovering deeper layers of the story that I hadn't yet discovered. And so I think, you know, you have to exercise your imagination. You have to work it. So just getting an idea isn't enough. You have to like look for them. You have to make yourself come up with ideas. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much for coming.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, hi, Laini.
Hi.
My name is Aranza. I'm such a big fan of yours. Well, my question is, what is the worst part of being a writer?
What is the worst part of being a writer? The worst part of being a writer for me is the writing part. No, I mean, it's the best part, but it's also the worst part. I don't know. I guess the best part actually is getting to come to things like this, is after the work is done. But for me, writing does not come easily. I have a lot of creative issues with perfectionism, and my brain fights me all the time. I can't just put down sentences on the page. My brain's like, no, it's not perfect yet. Fix it, fix it, fix it. And so it becomes very difficult to move forward often. So I have a lot of strategies I have to use all the time to keep myself moving forward. Writing first drafts is really, really hard for me. So I would say the first draft is the hardest part, is the worst part of writing for me. And then when I get through a draft and I get to edit it, that's like what my brain really wants to do. It just wants to fix it. So I would actually be happy writing like one sentence all day. Like my brain would be perfectly content with that, but that's a terrible way to write a book. So I am always having to push myself forward. And Strange the Dreamer was a really hard book to write, and I compare the experience in retrospect to driving across country with the brakes on. You know, like every second there's something that's hindering me from moving forward. And you actually, I guess, could drive across country with the brakes on, but it would be terrible, this grinding feeling of resistance. And that's what it feels like for me sometimes to write. But the thing that's important to know is that if you have that kind of brain too, you can still do it. It might not be easy, and you might always be resentful of other people for whom it's easier, but you can still do it, and it won't show in the finished product. People won't know that unless you tell them and complain about it at events. So if writing isn't easy for you, that doesn't mean that you're not meant to be a writer. It just means that's the kind of brain you have, and you have to figure out how to use it. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Lisette. I actually saw you yesterday and 4 years ago. So you're one of my favorite writers. My question is, well, I want to work in movies and TV shows, and actually I want to work in more the fantasy world. And I know that when we grow up, we are torn apart from the fantasy world. We're told that you have to be in the reality, you can't be dreaming all the time. And I think that your books are an amazing way of telling us that we can still be dreaming, we can stay in fantasy worlds. So my question is, do you have any words of encouragement or advice for us that are told to get away from fantasy and start living in reality, but when we don't want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I really empathize. There will always be people telling you that your dreams are unrealistic, and that you should do something more sensible. And usually that message comes from people who didn't have the courage themselves to pursue their dreams. And so either they're trying to protect you, or they're envious and they don't want to see someone else succeed where they were not able to succeed. And so it's just so important to shut out those voices and just, I think if you are driven to have a creative life, you feel that inside of you, and you won't ever be content if you don't give it your best try. And maybe it won't work out, but if you don't, I think there's always going to be this hollow feeling like you gave up too soon. And I do know so many people that are succeeding, and they're having a career as a writer or in TV or music or the arts, and it really is possible. And so it's a real job. It's a real career, just like any other real career. And there's lots of people out there doing it every day. And so why not you, you know? And the only reason why not is because there are people who failed who, on some level, want to see other people fail too, so that they can feel better about themselves. So don't listen to those people. Just know that there are lots of people working in those jobs that you want to do. And so can you. Yeah. So good luck.
Hola. Ay, qué raro. Tengo una duda sobre el libro de El soñador desconocido. ¿Por qué una palomilla? Bueno, es que en el libro aparece y es un poder. Y creo que la palomilla es color negro. ¿Por qué? ¿Qué significa? ¿Tiene un significado en sí? Porque, digo, tuviste muchas opciones para ponerla como portada. ¿Qué significa?
Yeah, why moths? Now, if you've read all of my books, then you would come to the conclusion that I have some obsession with moths. In my very first books, which are about fairies who hunt devils, there's a character who has magical abilities that are based on moths as well. And then in Strange the Dream, or in Daughter of Smoke and Bone, there's the hummingbird moths, and now we have the moths in this book are very strange. Sarai, the Muse of Nightmares, has a very unusual magical ability that I'm not sure I should tell you what it is because you kind of discover it in the book. But if you don't like moths, you would find it very creepy. And I think the thing that when you write books over a period of time, you learn things about yourself. Because I didn't know I was especially interested in moths, but I'm like, they keep coming up. I guess I am. And I think maybe, and also on a deeper level, the themes that I keep returning to and writing about, it's never really conscious that I'm writing about, the aftermath of war or letting go of hatred or forgiveness, and, these things, they just come up. So I learned that about myself. But in the case of moths, I think why I use it is because it's kind of like so moths are maligned. People think they're gross and creepy. And yet they're actually really beautiful, and they're not that different from butterflies, which everyone thinks are beautiful. So I think that they're beautiful but creepy, which I also think my books are. Beautiful but creepy. And so maybe they're just sort of the perfect metaphor. They're nocturnal, and there's just something about them that's unsettling. And so in the case of Sarai and the way moths are part of her gift, I mean, I don't know where I got that idea, and I think it's very weird, but I love it. So you guys will see what that is if you read the books. And it has to do with her ability to enter other people's dreams and manipulate them. Yes. So, I don't know. How do you say moth in Spanish? Polilla. Polilla? Polilla. Cool. Thank you. And as for why it's on the cover, that is the publisher's decision. But it's beautiful. I love this cover. So, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm so nervous. Thank you for coming, first of all. I love your books.
Thank you.
I have two questions. The first one is there's a secret message inside the books for the readers. And the second is I love to write, so I don't know where to find the inspiration to write, or I don't know, I'm blocked. Yeah, kind of. And there's all. Thank you.
So you're having a hard time what you want to write about?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, for your first question, by secret message, what do you mean?
Yeah, I don't know, like a secret from your life inside the books.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
No, I don't think so. So no, like that would be cool though. I should like somehow put a secret message into the book. In fact, in Muse of Nightmares, when it comes out, it has 2 secret alphabets. Okay. That you can use to create codes with, and I don't have it here, but it's really fun. I love codes and secret alphabets. So in Muse of Nightmares, you will find that. But as far as what to do, how to find your way to find what you want to write, I mean, when I was your age, I also didn't know what I wanted to write about, and so I stopped writing, which is not what you should do. For me, in my case, I hadn't rediscovered fantasy yet. I think, when I was a young person, the books that made me love reading were fantasy books. And over the years, in high school and college and university, I started reading literature and the things that are, considered acceptable, or, fantasy just sort of phased out of my life. And so then later, when I was writing, I was trying to write the kinds of things I was reading in school, and it was not at all, I had nothing to contribute to that body of work. I was like 21 years old. I had like 2 life experiences. Most of those books are about middle age and divorce and all these things. I had nothing to say. And so I stopped writing and I became an artist instead. And I studied illustration. I went to art school and all this path away from writing. And so later, and it was really, what made me find fantasy again was when Harry Potter came out. And I think for whatever reason, I was like open to reading fantasy again. Never was I against it, but I became curious and I read it. And slowly over the years, I started reading fantasy books again. I went on from Harry Potter to read a lot of other things. And when I tried to write again, I discovered that I had found my subject, or I had found a world that was much more exciting to me as a writer, and so it became easier, but not easy. Still, I think that it was a lot more work. It's always a lot more work than I imagined when I was younger to come up with a story and to always be pushing. I think you have to do a lot more work than will show. And I think writing exercises can be a great way. So after I wrote my first book, that I had spent maybe 3 years on it or something off and on, and I wanted to start writing shorter pieces for fun, just to kind of grow as a writer. And so that was that writing community online that I was talking about. And we would just, every week, we would put up a word or 2 words as a prompt, and everybody would write about it. And it was like just for fun, and they were short pieces, and it really helped me to find my voice as a writer. And I ended up writing a lot of stories that would never have happened otherwise. And I did a lot of exercises like that. In fact, I have, at the time, I wrote a website called Not for Robots. And if you Google Not for Robots, you can find it. And it has a lot of those kind of exercises, what you can do to kind of get inspired. I haven't updated it in like 10 years, but it's what I was doing when I was supposed to be writing my second book, and I was scared to write it, so I was writing a blog instead. And I would like to update it someday, but I think it talks more about that kind of thing, about finding subject to write about and that sort of stuff. Yeah. So I really wish you the best.
Yeah, because I already started a book, but I'm like blocked and I can't finish it. So
yeah, I mean, again, when you find yourself blocked in a project, most projects at some point you start out really excited and really passionate, and then at some point in the middle you're going to lose your passion. And the most important skill, I think, is to be able to re-excite yourself on the thing you're working on. You get to that point where I don't know what's going to happen next. That's when you think of the 20 things that could happen next. You make yourself do 20 things. And if you feel like maybe you've gone on a wrong path in your story, you need to back up to the last place that you loved it and start again from there, or something. Like, you just need to really not let it defeat you. Just find a way. Keep trying, keep trying, keep trying until you find a way forward. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Les tenemos una buena y una mala noticia. La mala es que nos queda tiempo para una sola pregunta muy breve. La buena es que Laini va a estar firmando autógrafos en el stand de Me Gusta Leer. Sí, va a ser en Me Gusta Leer, ¿verdad? Entonces pueden llevar sus libros y pueden ahí comentarle lo que nos haya quedado pendiente. Ya, ultimísima, rapidísimo.
No, everyone's running away.
Es que quieren... They want to...
Hi, my name is Diego. Thanks for coming. So I wanted to ask you about the final book of the trilogy, about Dreams of Gods and Monsters. So you know this thing about the star gods, this legend of them being this kind of warriors and all that? So I wanted to ask you if you will ever write something about it, because I really wanted to see that story. Like, I would feel like it would be epic to read and for you to write. So
you mean the story that would come next?
Yeah, maybe. This, you know, this legend of them being these warriors, these star gods or something, I don't know the name.
Yeah, the God Stars.
God Stars, yes. So if you will ever write something about it, like a whole story, or just the story, the legend.
I would like to go back to that. When I was writing Dreams of Gods and Monsters, halfway through, this other story began, you know, that I was like, this isn't really the way you end a trilogy, because I'm introducing another story, but I couldn't help it. And again, without giving away too much, if you read Strange and Muse at the end, it will suggest strongly a possibility of more stories in that world. And I would like to tell that story. I'm not sure if or when it will happen, but the possibility is there.
Yes, it would be awesome. Please.
Thank you.
Pues muchas gracias a todos por habernos acompañado, Laini.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.